Research is telling us this time around is that I don't really see to expect the type of polling errors that you saw mainly in some of those key battleground states that we saw back in 2016. I think the industry not only has really honed in and corrected itself for what those errors were post 2016 in their analysis, but even for Arizona here specifically, we've never had not only more polling coming in, but the polling's never been more accurate. So again, I don't see that to be a big of an issue this time around.
You know, a lot of people still question pollsters, especially after 16 when Donald Trump wasn't doing so well in the polls, and then Election Day was a very different story. Why should we trust you guys this time around?
Well, I don't think you should, lump everybody in if for a few bad apples, right? And so if you look at our case, for example, when polling in the 2016 election, we called every single race correctly. So we didn't have that miss issue. I mean, really, in the national, when you look at polling, the polling is actually more accurate it's ever been. It was within about a point of the actual national popular vote. The problem is people don't realize is that the popular vote does not determine who's the president is it's based on the electoral college and the road to 270, and the error really happened in three key states: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, where there's incredibly small margin of votes that Trump ended up winning by. But again, they made an issue of undersampling those that didn't have a high school education and some other groups. So, but that has been really been fixed this time around.
A lot of the polls you've conducted most recently, they're showing that it's still a very tight race between Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Martha McSally, Mark Kelly. Tell me about the people that you're contacting, because many of us are getting calls and texts and we're dismissing them pretty quickly. So the people that you're contacting, how reflective are they of the average Arizonan?
Well, there's a lot of different sampling techniques. You have random digital dial and these other different ways. In my past life, I ran campaigns as a political consultant, so I kind of know the ins and outs from the ground level. And so we do it based on by the voter file, right? I mean, you have to be a registered voter in order to vote. Well, we have access to that information, and then taking that voter list and randomizing it, and then getting a statistically significant sample that is reflective of the population is has been, I think, the secret of why we have such a strong record, and I think why we, basically are a trusted source because again, the devil lies in the details, so to speak, and again, very nuanced polling, but again, it's if it's talking to the right people, the right audience, and making sure it's reflective of that audience.
People don't always tell the truth to pollsters. So how do you manage when people aren't exactly forthcoming about what they're going to decide on election day?
Well, I mean, to put it in perspective, is that you hear this a lot. It's actually probably the most common thing brought up to me. Is what if they're lying? It's like, yeah, we can't judge if it's lying. But for example, our last poll was an all live caller poll with professional interviewers, and we go through a battery of questions before we even get to the actual horse race questions. And it's pretty easy to tell it's doing, but we haven't really seen that issue of the actual lying to voters, and not only that, or to the pollsters, but also you see is that undecided. I mean, in our last poll for president, for example, only 1% of the electorate was undecided. So again, the folks that are for Biden or for Trump are pretty adamant in their support. And that whole shy voter thing, there's really hasn't been much evidence to actually really prove that.
All right. So, Mike, you've been doing this for a while now. You tend to do quite extensive polling. What are your predictions for November 3rd?
Well, in predictions, remember, we're talking about odds here. And so when you're looking at it right now, is that I predict that the election will be very close here in Arizona when it comes to the presidential contest. I think I could see Trump winning by 1 or 2 points or Biden winning up to about 4 points, but it will probably fall about right in there. But Arizona will be very close. And I think every vote matters. So if you haven't voted, recommend getting out there, make sure your voice is heard because it really is going to make a national impact. And then when it comes to the Senate race, I think Mark Kelly has a bit of a bit more of an edge compared to Biden does in the presidential over his opponent Martha McSally, where has about a 5 point lead. There's 5% of voters undecided, but also he's been really doing well in fundraising and has had the advantage in broadcast spend. So I see, Kelly has a very good shot at winning, and I would be actually pretty surprised if he came up short, frankly, on the Senate contest.
We're talking about tens of millions of dollars in the Senate race alone. Who are the real winners when you talk about the money spent in this state?
All the vendors that they're paying the money towards. So direct mail, digital, broadcast, all that stuff. And so you've seen that Arizona, we saw a taste of what it's like to be in the national the national power struggle, whether it's to the control of the upper chamber of the Senate, to in this case, obviously run for president. And so we've seen that we saw a taste of what it's like to have a competitive race where that Senate race in the midterms in 2018 broke all records. This one has absolutely shattered all spending records when it comes to the Senate and presidential contests. And you have President Trump basically making weekly visits to Arizona in the last month, and also with the Democratic campaign with Kamala Harris and Biden. So you see that Arizona, follow the money and follow also where the high profile folks are going. And they're going not to Florida and other states. They are a little bit, but Arizona's, again, it's going to be a key state in who wins the election.
Mike Noble from OH Predictive Insights, thanks so much for your time.
Lauren, thank you so much for having me.